I start before the lights remember how to wake up, before the buses hiss at the curb, or the copy machines stretch their arms. At 5:30 a.m., it's just me, my breath fogging faintly in the cooler hallways, and the ring of keys at my hip whispering door numbers like an old prayer. In the science lab, I nudge the eyewash cap back into place and shake my head at the work order that never seems to climb the queue. In the library, I roll chairs off tables and smell the ghost of lemon cleaner bleeding into dust. The place sharpens before dawn the way a face does when it hears its name. I like to finish the cafeteria first when the eastern windows go from slate to milk. I can see my reflection in them. A man going gray at the temples, holding a mop like a spear, laughing at himself for thinking he looks like anything but the janitor. Past the kitchen, I push out to the dumpster pad with yesterday's cardboard, and the air hits me damp and green. Somewhere behind the chain link fence the woods hold their breath and listen back. That's when I feel that the fence isn't wrong, exactly, but it's been handled. The twist ties I ran last month to close a gap are turned backward, tightened in a neat little double wrap I didn't do. I run my thumb along the top wire and pick up a tacky shine that isn't due, sap, glue. I wipe it on my jeans and squat where the grass gives up to dirt. There's a path now, faint but sure, a brown seam curving from the trees to this corner, the kind of trail you can't make in one trip. I know the traffic patterns of this campus, the way a farmer knows his fields. Delivery trucks come up the access lane. Kids cut across the blacktop. Teachers park too close to the lines and pretend not to notice. No one belongs in this corner before 6, at the back of the cafeteria where the cameras don't quite see. I make a note on my clipboard fence, check latches, at DD ties, and take a picture with the shared work phone, framing the twisted wire and the bite-sized gap. The photo washes everything flatter than it feels. Behind me, the boilers exhale, a long, contented sound like a dog settling. Ahead of me, the windows brighten a shade, and it feels, for a second, like something on the other side of the glass has just stepped away. The keys knock my thigh as I cross to the service door, and the hallway smell folds over me. Wax and pencil shavings and a sweetness I can't place, like the space under the sink where the solvents live. I stop, breathe through my nose, and pretend I'm not smelling it. The radio crackles with no one. The principal won't roll in for another 20 minutes. I check the alarm panel for the blink I want. Steady green, thankful as a heartbeat, and run the outer loop, counting doors aloud because hearing the numbers makes them true. 1, 2, 3 West Stairwell 4, 5 Gym Vestibule 6. At 6, the latch kisses, but doesn't lock. I mark it with tape and pop it again until it clicks the way a door is meant to promise you safety. Back on the blacktop, I broom a scatter of gravel off the painted three-point arc and glance toward the playground. Recess isn't for hours yet, but I can see the corner where he'll stand. The burgundy hoodie kid spine squared to the chain link, face turned toward the trees like the branches are talking. He likes that corner. Kids with noise in there. Heads like corners. I tell myself the path by the fence is teenagers after hours, a shortcut from nothing to nowhere, and the tacky shine is pine sap caught on a sleeve. I tell myself a lot of things that aren't lies and aren't the truth either. A school is where you practice both. The principal's sedan glides into its usual slot with the same 2 tires kissing the same oil stain. I raise a hand. He returns it without looking up from his phone, and the building puts on its day face. I stash the broom, wheel the mop bucket toward 3B, because there's always something sticky in 3B, and catch that sweet mineral note again, a whisper that doesn't belong to breakfast or bleach. It drains away when I chase it, like a shadow stepping between two others. Routine, I tell myself, is where trouble leaves fingerprints. I tighten the painter's tape on my wrist until it creaks, tug my glove straight, and listen hard to the kind of silence that's really a crowd of soft sounds. The clock in the office, the Vayak shiver, the far-off cough of a bus that hasn't turned in yet. Somewhere outside, a bird gives a single sharp note and then refuses to sing the rest. I put one palm flat on the wall and feel the building answer warm, humming, and holding a secret the way a fist holds a coin. Recess always looks like order from a distance and chaos up close, and I move along its edge like a tide line, broom in one hand, radio on my belt, pretending I'm part of the scenery. That's how I noticed the boy, the burgundy hoodie too big for June heat, planted in the back corner where grass surrenders to the chain link and the woods lean close enough to eavesdrop. His spine straight, his face angled into the trees as if there's a voice there only he can hear. The rest of the yard runs its noisy orbit kickballs thudding, jump ropes slapping, a chorus of names shouted and forgotten, while he makes no wake at all. Even the rock throwers skip the temptation of his stillness. A magpie scolds from the low pines, that bright metallic clack like a jar lid, and my eyes follow the sound to the fence where I can't help clocking the details the way I always do. The twist ties I replaced are new but not mine, cinched in a neat double turn and sheared clean. The dirt between the last post and the utility box is worn into a thin, fresh seam. The lower run of wire sags just enough to admit a determined knee. I tell myself corners collect stories like drains collect leaves, but my thumb is already worrying the painter's tape on my wrist, itching for the satisfaction of marking a fix that will actually fix something. Ms. Bell comes out with a stack of copies hugged to her chest like a loaf, hair pinned in the way that says she ran out of hands minutes ago, and she spots me half a beat before she spots him. "Morning, Bob," she says softly, and I tip my cap and, without meaning to, tilt my chin toward the hoodie, and she follows my gaze and nods once, more to herself than to me, like she's just added another pebble to a pocket she's been carrying all week. "Sven," she says, that measured teacher voice she uses when a kid's name needs to be a bridge and not a rope. He keeps to himself. I want to tell her when I want to tell everyone that. Fences don't keep things out. They just teach them where to press, but I settle for, "I'll run some ties after lunch." And she says, "Send me the list and I'll ticket it." And we both pretend that will matter if it needs to. The ball from the fourth graders' game rolls rogue toward the corner. Two boys giving chaotic chase. It kisses the fence and comes back like it knows better. And Sven doesn't flinch, doesn't even glance. And that calm sets off a small alarm in me, louder than any bell. I finish skimming the blacktop, and on my way to dump the pan, I cut behind the cafeteria, where the delivery lane collects a film of dust. And there's a narrow tread I don't recognize. Too skinny for our trucks. Too true for a kid's bike, and I squat and press too. Fingers to the ribbing, and smell a little flash of gasoline that might be my imagination, and might be the day finally telling me what it's been trying to say since dawn. Back at the corner, the magpie has gone silent, and in its place, a little length of twig dangles from the fence, wrapped with a tidy strip of silver duct tape, spinning slowly like a charm or a marker. And I pluck it free without thinking and slip it into my pocket, and feel instantly foolish, like I've taken something that's less a trinket than a code. The whistle blows and the yard redraws itself into lines. I move with the teachers, holding gates, herding strays, the way a building's old bones pitch in when the blood rushes. And as the classes file past, I feel his eyes on me finally, not bold, not shy, just weighing, and I give him what I give every kid who looks. Too long at the parts of school that most kids don't see. The small nod that says, "I see you, but I am not a door you can walk through." He blinks once and turns back to the trees, and the moment closes with the squeak of the hinge I keep meaning to. Oil and the rattle of the gate chain I replaced twice this year. By the time the bell swallows the last shout in recess, drains away, the corner looks empty again. But the fence feels handled the way a doorknob feels warm after a stranger lets go. I write fence rear corner, add ties, check. Camera angle on my clipboard, add deliveries, verify route, and in the margin I scribble bird charm, like I'm going to forget the weight of it in my pocket or the way it moved when there wasn't any wind. On my way inside, I pass Ms. Bell corralling a paper jam out of the copier like she's negotiating a truce. She asks as if I saw anything and I say, just the usual almosts. And she gives me the kind of look you keep in your back pocket for when you need to say more with less. In the hallway, the air tastes faintly sweet again, solvent, maybe, or maybe a memory. And it's gone the second I try to chase it. As if the building is being polite about whatever it's hiding. I roll the cart toward 3B with the broom handles ticking softly, every sound in its place, every place holding more than it shows. And I tell myself what I always tell myself when the day starts to feel like a riddle. Routine is where the answers wait. And I'll keep walking the loop until the loop tells me which part isn't the loop at all. The work order said 3B117 jammed, which is janitor for you're going to find something. You wish you hadn't. And sure enough, I rolled my cart down the corridor after last bell. When the building turns into the echo of itself, and there it was, a locker wearing 2 mouths. The district-issued combo hung from the latch like jewelry, never set, never spun. Underneath it grinned a shiny store-bought padlock with teeth so new they still had that oily rainbow sheen. I checked my sheet, no secondary locks authorized in 3B, and felt the little hairs on my wrist stand up under the loop of painter's tape I wear like a reminder to notice what doesn't want to be noticed. The smell hit next, not strong, but wrong for a hallway. A sweet mineral note that lives in the custodial closet with the solvents and never, ever belongs out here. I tried the school combo just to give myself the gift of hoping. The dial turned smooth as a lie and did nothing. I could wait until morning, let admin play it by the book, but the air had that charged feeling you get before a storm, and I'm the one they call when a door won't choose a side. I fetched the bolt cutters from the cart, cradled them low so the metal didn't sing on tile, and leaned the jaws into the shackle. There's always that tiny, stubborn heartbeat before the cut where a lock thinks it can still be a lock. Then it surrendered with a soft, embarrassed sigh. I eased the door an inch, then 2, because there's a difference between opening a thing and letting it open itself to you. And the first thing that rolled forward like a coin finding daylight was a clear plastic bottle with half its label torn off and the warning diamond intact, white skull and crossbones sitting neat as a typed threat. Behind it, a fat roll of silver duct tape, a cheap disposable phone still shrink-skinned, a BI slider with its metal guard pried back, and a short length of white clothesline coiled exactly the way we coil extension cords in the shop. I didn't touch a thing. Rules like that aren't just for liability. They're for staying the kind of person whose hands don't have to explain themselves later. I breathed through my mouth and felt that sweetness crawl up anyway, the way a smell becomes a taste when it knows it's not welcome. I shut the door gently to the first click and stepped into the nearest classroom to use the wall phone, because the radio's good for chatter and bad for secrets. Ms. Bell answered on the second ring, her voice doing that calm but faster than usual cadence that tells you she's already carrying 3 thoughts in each hand. "Bob," she said. "Evening," I said, keeping it ordinary so the situation would follow my lead. "I've got a locker that doesn't feel like a locker." There was a bead of paper whispering on her end. "Number?" I told her. 5 minutes, she said, and hung up like someone who had just decided what the rest of her night was for. I stood in the doorway and watched the hall keep its own counsel, a kindness poster peeling at one corner, A fluorescent tube trying and failing to restart its life with a little stutter buzz stutter. The far HVAC cough smoothing back into its hum. When she came around the corner, cardigan slung off one shoulder, keys laced between her fingers with purpose. I popped the door and stepped aside. She didn't make a sound when she saw the bottle and the tape and the quiet readiness of it all. She just closed the door like you close a sleeping child's and put her hand flat against the locker as if taking its temperature. "Okay," she said, breathing out, voice low enough to keep the building from hearing. "I'm going to make a call. Leave it as is. We'll treat this as a drill until it isn't." I nodded, grateful for orders that matched the shape of my worry. She walked back toward the office with her phone already dialing, and I watched her hands tremble just enough to count. I locked the hallway doors behind her and started to wheel my cart toward the custodial closet, then stopped at the exit near the loading dock because the sweetness was stronger there, riding the cool draft under the door like a passenger who'd found the right bus. I cracked it, listened, heard nothing but the boiler exhale and the far, wet hush of the tree line. I shut it again, slid a wedge in the jamb so it would behave when we needed it to, and wrote 2 lines on my clipboard in block letters big enough to be read from across a room. 3B117. Do not touch. Pull station on M spells nod. Then I stood still for 1 full minute the way we were taught in a safety course a lifetime ago. To let your adrenaline sit down so your judgment can stand up, and I felt the building's pulse through the floor, steady and slow, like it was trying to show me how to breathe. When I finally moved, I did it the way I always do after finding proof that the day has teeth. Slow, deliberate, inventorying everything a second time. The cutter back in its cradle, the hall lights toggled to full. The alarm panel's green eye blinking exactly the way it's supposed to when nothing is wrong and everything is. Morning felt like weather holding its breath. The kind of charged air that makes even the fluorescence seem too sharp. And Miss Bell found me outside 3 bites with her voice pitched 1 notch lower than calm, telling me admin knew enough to act without naming it, that she'd quietly lift a few kids from classes. And if she gave me the nod, I was to pull the nearest station and send the whole place out back as if we were practicing. I said yes because that's what you say when the building starts speaking through people. I prepped like a man laying out tools for a job he doesn't want cones staged at the rear doors. Wedges in my pocket for the hinge that lies about being latched. A quick walk of the outer loop to make sure the field gate wasn't pinned by the grounds crew's bad habit. The radio on my belt felt heavier than its batteries. By second period, I'd smelled that solvent sweet note twice in places it shouldn't live by the loading dock, under the west stair, and each time it faded when I tried to chase it, leaving only the honest breath of wax and dust. I cut through the cafeteria and slipped a hand against the back exit bar so it would remember to leave clean. Then paused at the fence because the twist ties I'd argued back into obedience last month were simply gone, snipped or unspooled in a way that read as patient. In my pocket, the duct tape twig I'd pocketed at recess felt like a little metronome, ticking without moving. Third period, the wrong faces drifted into 3B, the way leaves find a corner, quiet and deliberate, and I parked my cart across the hall and polished the same scuff until I could see my own hand moving in it. Sven slid into his back corner shadow, burgundy hued up despite the heat, and I had the unsettling thought that some rooms develop their own weather. Ms. Bell lifted the classroom phone, said nothing I could hear, then stepped into the hall and gave me a look as small as a click nothing dramatic, just the kind of nod that means go now, not next. I lifted the clear cover and pulled the red handle down, and the alarm didn't so much sound as split the building along its seams. Lights strobed, the siren unscrolled itself from the ceiling, and all those quiet plans we write in binders stood up and started walking. Teachers raised their hands and counted, voices pitched for steadiness rather than volume. Kids flowed the way they do when adults clear the rocks from the river, a few with the wide-eyed look that says fire drills have teeth for them. I jogged to the rear exit, jammed a wedge under the door that likes to kiss shut, and put my body where the bottleneck wanted to be, pointing and smoothing and borrowing the weight of routine. Eyes up, folks. We're heading to the field. Keep your line. You know the drill. At the far corner by the chain link, the wind combed the grass toward the woods, and I saw motion that wasn't Student 3. Ridgelines of shape pressed into the shade where the pines begin, blurred not by distance, but by their refusal to be fully here. One raised, something that caught light the way a bottle does. Another tilted its head in a way I have never seen a person tilt, as if the neck had learned its hinge from an animal or a mirror that lies. I cut across the grass to the access road and met Coach Reynolds mid-stride. He didn't need the words, but I gave them anyway. South fence, in the green, and he blew his whistle, that granite-splitting sound that makes even crows reconsider their plans. Blue shirts moved through the gate like ink through paper, quiet where quiet counts. One of them flattening a palm toward me without looking. An efficient "we've got it" that let me go back to being the man with cones and keys. I pivoted, swept the last class into place, and planted myself at the edge of the lines where kids turn their fear into questions. I answered with posture and a low voice, and the practice lies that aren't lies. We drill, so we're good at it. You did great. Almost done. Out of the corner of my eye, the officers disappeared into the trees, and the shade swallowed the three shapes as if it had been waiting with its mouth open. No crash, no chase noise, just an absence that felt freshly made. The alarm cycled down to a steady blink on the panel at the field gate, and the principal walked the rows counting by tens, his hand shaking the way a leaf trembles only after the wind stops. Somewhere near my ankle, the duct-tape twig in my pocket shifted when there wasn't a reason for anything to move. And I understood in a small, practical way that signals work, even when you don't know the code. I called over to the art teacher to bring her line a step left to make room for the special ed class ramping through the gate. Then checked the hinge again, then checked the gate chain again. The rituals that keep your hands busy while your head tries not to make monsters out of silhouettes. When the all clear finally came, it arrived in gestures, not words. Two officers backed through the pines with the kind of faces that say later. The sheriff's nod, Ms. Bell's exhale, the principal's chin point toward re-entry, and I rode the wave backward, closing wedges, catching a stray water bottle with my foot, feeling the building take itself back into itself. On the way in, I palmed the alarm panel just because the plastic is warm and real, then looked across the field to the corner where the fence makes its quiet promise. And I knew two things at once. The plan had worked the way plans are supposed to, and something on the other side of our drills had been rehearsing too. By evening, the building felt like a patient after a fever cooler. Quieter, the kind of quiet that's really exhaustion wearing a clean shirt. And I worked the way you do when your hands need small tasks, so your head won't run ahead. Empty pencil sharpeners that spit sawdust like blonde snow. Refill soap cartridges that always leak down your knuckles. Wipe the greasy crescents of fingerprints from 3B's door glass until my shoulder complains, and then some. The district sent a perimeter specialist who walked the fence with a tablet, photographing hinges I already know by feel. He told me the phrase "integrity is satisfactory," which is contractor for "I can't fix what you're actually worried about." And I nodded because some days you let other people keep their illusions. Police tape kited in the afternoon breeze at the back corner, and an officer I didn't know wrote my name and time on a log when I crossed the line to toss trash. And I could tell by the way he thanked me, gentle, over-polite, that I looked more rattled than I wanted to admit. Ms. Bell left late, cradling a tote bag that sagged like wet paper. Gave me a small wave that said good work and also said we're not finished. Then disappeared toward a car that looked too small for the weight she was carrying. The principal's voicemail had already hit the town by 6. Exercise. Abundance of caution. Gratitude to staff. Not a lie, not the whole truth. The kind of message that keeps a school from having to learn new words all at once. Teachers texted me thank yous. I didn't answer because I don't know how to accept applause for pulling a handle I was supposed to pull. Instead, I stood in the custodial closet and set the duct tape twig on the shelf above the floor machine like it might hum if I left it alone. Then checked the boiler room because I always check the boiler room when I can't say out loud what I'm looking for. The pilot hummed steady, that blue coin wink of heat, and on the concrete near the door sat a key tag I didn't recognize plastic. Blue, stamped sub-access, its ring snapped clean like a breadstick. I held it up to the light, turned it over, and found a crude arrow scratched into the back with something soft. Pointed left toward the service corridor that runs along the art rooms and exits by the field. The same geometry that threads the corner where Sven stares into the trees. I pocketed it and told myself it was probably dropped by a sub who panicked during the drill. Except subs don't carry tags stamped like that, and panic doesn't scratch neat little arrows that match roots. On the way back through the foyer, I palmed the alarm panel just to feel something solid. The green LED blinked its patient heartbeat, and a thin printed strip hung from the side slot listing events in stubborn caps Polsta 3B Hall. Door 4 rear, held open. Door 4 rear closed. Fire depth a CK so tidy you could forget the moment where the world tried to split. I tore the strip off, folded it once, set it back on the ledge, and told the panel thank you under my breath like it had done me a favor. Outside the light went gold and then flat. I pushed the last bag to the dumpster, and by the cut fence the tape had been snipped away for evidence, leaving the metal mouth open enough to show what it wanted. Between roots, the shoe prints had hardened with the heat into little stamps of direction, and a single burgundy thread lay caught on a barb. Fine as hair. Easy to miss if you weren't already living in the inch by inch. I plucked it and didn't pocket it. I laid it on my clipboard and traced it with a finger like a map that won't admit it's a map. Back inside, the echo of my steps felt one beat off from my own rhythm, like the hallway was walking a half second after me. I shook it off, finished the trash run, and checked the west stair for the sweet solvent breath that had been flirting at the edges all day. It was gone or hiding smart. Before I clocked out, I went back to the fence with a spool of fresh ties. I threaded and twisted until the gap was less a mouth and more a seam. Then, because something in me wanted to answer a question I hadn't been asked, I hung the twig charm back where I'd found it. The tape scuffed, the stick balanced, and watched it spin once, twice, and settle as if it had decided it understood me. In the parking lot, I paused with my hand on the truck door and listened the way I listened the first morning. Past diesel and birds, past wind and baseball chatter from the far field, to the woods where a small, dry click sounded like a tongue on teeth or a bottle cap flirting with glass. Not loud, just deliberate. People say a school sleeps at night. I know better. Buildings dream, and sometimes they walk in their sleep. I slid behind the wheel with the keys heavy in my pocket, the sub-access tag a cold coin against my thigh, and promised the place the same thing I always promise it when the day shows teeth. I'll be here early, I'll walk the loop slow, and if the dark is listening back, it can learn my routine the way I've learned it step for step, breath for breath, until one of us blinks. I went back after closing because some doors are braver in the dark. The sub-access tag a cold coin in my pocket, and the little arrow on its back pointing me left no matter how I tried to convince myself to go home. The building had that empty-sounding fullness it gets at night, the way a shell sounds like ocean if you press your ear close. And I walked without the radio because I didn't want static giving me away to whoever had been rehearsing here longer than we had. The service corridor past the art rooms is narrow enough to make a grown man square his shoulders and think about the choices that keep him in jobs like mine. I counted junction boxes like rosary beads 1, 2, 3, and stopped at the painted cinder block where the arrow would point if it were more than a suggestion. On the left, Half a foot off the floor, a rusted hasp bore the ghost of a lock. The screws weren't factory Phillips in a wall that was poured with flatheads everywhere else, and the paint stripe ran continuous over the seam, which is a trick you learn on sheds and forget to unlearn when you graduate to schools. I worked a drywall knife into the hairline and felt it catch on a screw that had been set soft. 2 minutes later, the panel loosened with a dry sigh, like it had been holding its breath since the last time someone asked it to speak. Inside, the space was knee-high and deep as a closet lying on its side, crowded with what looked like the supply table for a science fair no one should win. A milk crate of clear bottles with half-peeled labels, where the warning diamonds were the only thing left. A nest of white clothesline cut into lengths and coiled with the same neatness I'd seen in 3B117. Rolls of silver duct tape reduced to fat bracelets. A Ziploc full of cheap lighters with their safety guards pried back like teeth. Against the far wall, someone had taped up an 8.5 times 11 bell schedule and, beside it, a printout of last year's fire drill log. Dates highlighted where the building had emptied fast, as if our practice had been their practice too. Beneath those, a school map with 3 corners circled in red, and a 4th marked with a simple X that lived exactly where I was kneeling. On a lower shelf, a row of twigs wrapped with duct tape sat in a cardboard jewelry organizer, each cell labeled in tidy block letters. Mom lunch, 2's recess, 3B hall. DOKK, some slots empty. The way a tool belt looks when somebody is out on a job. On top of the organizer lay a bag of threads gathered from shirts and hoodies, like trophies from a hunter with no season. And threaded through the bag's zip was a single burgundy filament so fine it caught the light like hair. My fingers didn't move, but something in me recoiled as if I'd already touched it and recognized the rasp of it from the barb on the fence. To the right, a spiral notebook sat open to a page that would have been unremarkable if not for the 2 columns of dates hours on the left. Drills, early releases, assemblies, and on the right a set of times and short codes in a handwriting so careful it could have been printed. Door 4-12, Gate-16, COACHW, Bob panel, regroup shade. My name made a neat dark divot in the paper where the pen had rested, proof that whoever was planning this considered me not scenery, but a moving piece on their board. The part of me that knows how to hold him up like a spear wanted to start throwing the whole stash into the hall and call it in loud. The part that pays attention for a living knew a scene with this much deliberately tidy energy should be left undisturbed until someone whose report carries a badge writes it down. I took my phone out and shot every angle I could without stepping deeper bottles, cords, charms and cells, the burgundy thread. Then slid the panel half closed with my free hand and froze because something in the dark made that tiny click I'd heard from the woods. Tongue on teeth, bottle cap flirting with glass, the sound of patience. It didn't come from the crawl space. It came from the corridor behind me, where the air had shifted without moving. And in that same instant, the motion sensor at the far end failed to trigger, which told me exactly how long the bulb had been unscrewed and then set crooked to fake a burnout. I turned my head just enough to put the corner of my eye on the corner of the hall and saw nothing but the kind of nothing that is choosing to be nothing. I slid the panel fully closed, pressed the screws back in with fingers, not torque, so they'd hold for 10 minutes and look untouched for 2, and walked backward 3 steps, then 4, then turned and walked like a man who owns every corridor he's in. At the alarm panel near the cafeteria, I set my palm flat to feel its warm heartbeat. And then, because names on notebooks are how stories start, but also how they end, I called Ms. Bell and the sheriff from the wall phone that doesn't leave a record on my pocket. I didn't say the word cash or the word arson. I said, "We have a room that isn't a room," and gave them the junction counts and directions a custodian uses when he wants first responders to move where they need to without asking him to say the quiet part. While I waited, I watched the field camera feed on the tiny monitor above the panel gray, and in the back corner by the fence, the twig charm I had rehung turned once, twice, and then steadied like it had heard a command I couldn't. When the officers arrived, I didn't lead them so much as I witnessed them going where I'd been. And when they came back out with the crate and the organizer and the little bag bagging that burgundy thread like it was a vein, the sheriff looked at me in a way that says he still doesn't pray, but sometimes he nods to the ceiling just in case. The dark reveal wasn't a monster with teeth. It was a kit, a schedule, a mirror held up to our routines until they became someone else's route. And somewhere between the circled corners and the labeled charms was the certainty that Sven had stood where I had just stood, close enough to snag his hoodie on a barb, and close enough to hear the click that means the next move is ready. I locked the building down to the bones that night and still drove home feeling like I was the one being left open. Because once you see the practice room, you understand. The difference between a drill and an attack is only ever who pulls the handle first.